on a college campus. Conservative activist Charlie Kirk gunned down in front of a crowd at Utah Valley University. The state's governor calling it a political assassination.
Stop. Whatever you're doing, what I'm about to tell you will hit you hard and leave you numb. On a bright morning at a university, in front of cameras and thousands of people, something terrible happened. A public figure was shot and killed while speaking on stage. The scene unfolded in full view live for anyone watching. It was not a private crime hidden from sight. It was an act of violence that played out in real time and reached millions. The speaker stood confidently, testing ideas and pushing back at students during a campus discussion. The event felt like any other. Lively debate, laughter, people lining up to ask questions. But then, at 2:17 p.m., a single gunshot cut through the air. It sounded like a clap of thunder. In an instant, the energy of the room turned to shock. People screamed. Chairs were pushed aside. Phones were clutched as students scrambled to get away. Some people froze, unable to move, their eyes fixed on the stage. Others fell to their knees, trying to help. What made the attack so shocking was its precision. The bullet came from more than 200 yards away, fired by someone using a long-range rifle. It hit the platform with deadly accuracy. The microphone clattered to the floor. The speaker slumped, reaching out as if trying to hold onto life. No one had expected to see death during what had been billed as a spirited talk. The feed didn't stop. The live stream continued to show the chaos, the confused faces, the effort to comfort the wounded, and the growing blood on the floor. Within seconds, social media exploded. Messages poured in from around the world. Hashtags trended. People shared their disbelief, their horror, and their sorrow. Then the worst moment for one family came when the speaker's wife learned what had happened while she was still on air. She was broadcasting from home when someone told her the news. Her reaction was immediate and raw. Her knees buckled. She fell apart. The sound of her crying spread across the internet. Images of her shock and grief became the most watched clips that day. People watched because her pain felt real and immediate. A young mother realizing her life had just been shattered. Her public collapse showed, in the clearest terms, the human cost of what had just taken place. At first glance, this looked like a random act of cruelty. But as investigators and witnesses began to speak, the picture grew darker. People who were there said they saw strange behavior from some of the security staff. A video clip circulated showing a man in what appeared to be a security uniform moving oddly near the building just before the shot. That image raised a new and terrible question. Did someone inside the event help the shooter? Rumors spread fast. Some said the attacker had help. Others suggested a carefully planned plot. The gunshot was not a wild shot fired in panic. It was a trained, calculated strike, the kind of shot a marksman might take. How could such a precise attack happen on a campus that had security personnel and metal detectors? How could the shooter escape without a trace? Those questions pushed people toward one frightening conclusion. Someone with knowledge of the event may have made this possible. Adding to the confusion was a leaked audio recording that began circulating online. In that clip, a voice believed to be the wife's can be heard. Fragile and shaking, she whispered that this was not just an attack on her husband, but a plan meant to silence a broader group. Whether the recording was real or staged, it changed the tone of the public conversation. For many, it proved that this was more than a crime of a single angry person. It was a message meant to intimidate others. Stories like this pull a nation apart. Families, friends, and strangers picked sides. Some declared the slain speaker a martyr, a person silenced for what he believed and said. Others accused supporters of turning a private tragedy into a political tool. City streets filled with people holding candles and chanting. In other places, people protested angrily, demanding answers from authorities. The country, already divided, felt that split widen. Even prominent public figures weighed in. A former senior leader made a public statement calling the attack a stain on democratic life and urging people to look inward at how hatred spreads. For many, his words were a call for reflection. For others, they came across as blaming the victims. The comments sparked fresh outrage and debate. People argued not only about who was responsible for the shooting, but about what it meant. for the nation's values and for the way people argued with one another. Then hackers and online groups stepped into the story, making the confusion worse. One collective claimed to have proof that the shooter did not act alone. They hinted that the attacker had met with a powerful backer before the event and threatened to publish a video. The possibility of outside funding, of coordination by people with money and influence, moved the idea of a lone criminal into the realm of planned political violence. Those claims were shocking, and they led many to ask, was this an act of revenge? A paid assassination? A plot tied to political aims? Inside the small circle of the speaker's friends, there were warnings. People close to him said that, days before the event, he had told them he was worried. He said that if he kept speaking the way he did, someone might try to shut him up. Hearing those words later, after the attack, made them sound like a premonition. Whether they were wishful thinking or a real warning, they added another painful layer to the public's need for answers. Official investigators focused on evidence, seeking answers in forensics, security footage, and the chain of communications that led up to the shooting. Anonymous tips began to flow in. Grainy clips appeared on forums and messaging apps, showing a figure in a security-like uniform entering parts of the building that should have been closed. People debated whether the footage showed a mistaken identity, a plant, or someone placed there deliberately. The clip was taken down and re-uploaded, shared, and discussed until it became part of the storm of suspicion sweeping the country. At the heart of all this was a family left with a hole no one could fill. The speaker's widow became both a symbol and a person. As she clung to her children and tried to find a way forward, the public watched. Some people rallied to her, offering support and praise. Others attacked her on social channels, accusing her of performing or seizing attention. The cruelty of that reaction cut across the grief and revealed how quickly private pain becomes public spectacle in the age of endless media. The days after the killing brought leak after leak, alleged financial records, blurred photos, snippets of conversation posted by anonymous accounts. Each new item burned like tinder on a pile of frustration and fear. Some of those documents seemed to tie a suspect to outside donors. Others were dismissed as fake. But for those who believed the leaks, the picture was clear. This was not a random act. It was a planned, coordinated attack designed to send a chilling message. People argued about motive and meaning. Was this an act meant to silence a single voice or a broad attempt to intimidate many? Did the shooter act alone, driven by personal hatred, or was he directed by forces with political aims? In the absence of clear answers, people filled the gaps with their worst fears. Conspiracy theories spread faster than facts. The public conversation became louder and less patient for verification. Through all the chatter, the human cost stood out. A mother whispered in the dark, "Why my family?" The question was simple and brutal. It reminded everyone that behind the headlines and the hashtag battles was a household that would never be the same. Children who once ran to their father after school now faced a life without him. Friends and colleagues lost someone who had been part of their daily conversations. The community that gathered on campus to argue and think about ideas now had to deal with the trauma of having seen a life end in front of them. That trauma spread beyond the campus. Newsrooms replayed the same video clips over and over. People replayed the wife's reaction and cried with her or argued over whether watching it was right. That image, her arms around her children, her eyes hollow with grief, stayed in the public mind. It became the single frame that captured everything: loss, anger, fear, and the fragile nature of safety. And the story did not stop moving. Every hour seemed to bring another leak, another recording, or another accusation. Supporters dug in, demanding accountability. Critics said the entire drama was being used to score political points. The result was a nation that felt more divided than ever, anxious about the next steps and unsure who, if anyone, would bring a full and honest account of what had happened. The final, most frightening thought for many was this: whoever planned and carried out that attack may not have only taken one life. They may have set in motion a cascade of fear that changed public life. When violence becomes a way to win or silence an argument, the foundation of public discourse cracks. If people can be shot while standing in full view of thousands, what does that mean for free speech, for rallies, for debate? Those questions hung in the air like smoke after a fire. This is a story of grief and of questions without answers. It shows how a single violent act can ripple outward, breaking a family, tearing a community, and pushing a country toward greater distrust. At the center of it all are ordinary people forced to live with extraordinary pain. They deserve truth, and they deserve time to grieve without being pulled into 1,000 competing narratives. That is the most important point to remember. Beneath the politics and the rumors is a family whose life has been forever altered. While investigations continue and while the public argues about motive and meaning, the real, lasting task is simple but heavy: to seek the truth calmly, to support those who suffered, and to resist letting fear and division become the new normal. It was more than just a killing. It was a strike that carried the fingerprints of those in power, a warning aimed at everyone watching. Across the country, fear began to replace anger. People whispered that if Charlie Kirk, a man always surrounded by cameras, bodyguards, and crowds, could be murdered in the open, then who was safe anymore? Was every politician now a target? Was every outspoken figure one step away from silence? Parents started pulling their kids out of universities, worried that protests and speeches might turn violent. Politicians canceled rallies and appearances, choosing safety over connection. News channels filled with images of empty stages and barricaded campuses. A dark shadow of dread seemed to stretch across the nation, but no public panic compared to the private pain of Erica, Charlie's widow. At home, she sat with 2 young children, too innocent to understand that their father would never return. When she stepped before the cameras once again, her voice trembled as she said, "They didn't just kill my husband, they killed my children's future." If this is the cost of speaking the truth, then America is broken. That single clip tore across the internet like wildfire. Millions shared it with captions such as "This is Our Lady Diana moment" and "America's heart is bleeding." Others mocked it, claiming it was staged for sympathy, feeding an already raging storm of suspicion and conspiracy theories. Overnight, Erica became more than a grieving widow. She became the unwilling centerpiece of one of the most dangerous tragedies in modern American politics. The questions multiplied. Who had really killed Charlie Kirk? What truth did he know that made him worth silencing? And the darkest question of all, how far would those in power go to bury it? The deeper people dug, the more terrifying it became. This wasn't just an attack on one man. It was a warning, a chilling message to anyone brave enough to speak too loudly. Charlie's life was ended by a sniper's bullet, but that shot might also have marked the beginning of one of America's darkest chapters. The courtroom where the case unfolded carried a weight that was almost unbearable. The air felt heavy, as though everyone was suffocating under the pressure of what was about to be revealed. Every eye in the room was locked on the witness stand. Reporters sat poised with pens and cameras, ready to capture every breath, every whisper. Online feeds buzzed with predictions and rumors, but nothing could have prepared the world for what was coming. The judge called for silence. At that moment, a bailiff carried in a plain envelope. Nobody knew where it came from. The source remains a mystery even now. Inside were documents that flipped the scandal upside down. These weren't just pieces of paper. They were confessions, secret recordings, and signed contracts that laid bare betrayals so shocking that people in the courtroom literally gasped aloud. Mouths were covered in disbelief. Tears welled up in strangers' eyes. The gallery erupted in chaos. What the documents revealed was worse than anyone had imagined. It wasn't only about broken promises or lies told behind closed doors. It was a network of manipulation, staged publicity events, financial fraud, and emotional cruelty that had stretched on for years. The evidence didn't just tell a story, it forced the courtroom to feel the raw wounds of lives destroyed. And in a stunning twist, the person the public thought was the victim was suddenly painted as the mastermind. Gasps rippled through the room like gunfire. Fingers pointed. A collective scream rang out. This was no longer just a scandal, it was war. The judge's gavel slammed against the bench, demanding order. But the chaos only grew. A witness fainted. Reporters trampled one another in a race to blast the breaking news online. Social media feeds froze under the weight of millions of comments. People watching live from their phones cried openly. This wasn't just a case anymore, it was a cultural earthquake. Then came the moment that history will never forget. The accused, crushed under the weight of the evidence, broke down in tears. But these weren't the fake tears of someone caught lying. This was a raw, gut-wrenching cry, a howl from a soul ripped apart. The sound was so haunting that the entire room fell silent. Yet instead of sympathy, the crowd shouted for blood. Liar, fraud, monster, they screamed, as security guards struggled to hold back enraged family members. Chairs were knocked over, a reporter's camera smashed, and a fight broke out in the back rows. The courtroom had become an arena, not for justice, but for revenge. And then, as if the day hadn't already collapsed into madness, another bombshell hit. A voice recording appeared on the courtroom screens, playing for everyone to hear. The trembling voice admitted to orchestrating parts of the scandal for money, for fame, for control. The confession echoed like death bells. The crowd froze. Some covered their mouths. Others whispered, "No, this can't be real." But it was. The accused pounded the table, sobbing, begging for forgiveness, calling out family members who had turned their backs. The breakdown was complete, raw, and devastating. Headlines exploded in real time. Collapse that shook the nation. Confession caught live in court. Family destroyed forever. Even celebrities watching from home posted reactions online. Some mocked, others cried, while a few admitted they were shaken because it reminded them of their own hidden traumas. The scandal had become bigger than one person, one family. It was now a mirror held up to society itself. Security began dragging people out of the courtroom. Children in the gallery were shielded by their parents. Elderly relatives sobbed uncontrollably. The accused, unable to stand, was pulled away by officers as cameras zoomed in on their swollen, tear-stained face, an image destined to live in infamy. Outside, thousands of protesters filled the streets. Some demanded justice, others shouted for redemption. Police struggled to keep order as helicopters circled overhead. The entire city felt like it was collapsing under the weight of this single family's destruction. And the most frightening part, the story wasn't over. Sources confirmed there were more documents, more recordings, more evidence waiting to surface. What the world had just witnessed wasn't the climax. It was only the beginning. The family's name was reduced to ashes. The accused's reputation destroyed forever. The children, innocent of all of it, were scarred by a legacy of betrayal they never chose. The sound of those courtroom sobs, the howl of a soul in pain, would haunt everyone who heard it for the rest of their lives. This wasn't just a scandal. It wasn't only betrayal. It was the collapse of trust, the destruction of innocence, and the creation of a wound that may never heal. And the world couldn't look away. Because deep down, everyone understood this wasn't just their story. It was a reflection of our own, the way greed, power, and obsession with fame can destroy everything we claim to hold dear. As the courthouse doors slammed shut and the world braced itself for the next revelation, one thing became clear. This tragedy will be remembered forever. Families were torn apart, reputations burned, lives destroyed, all for ambition, control, and ego. The screams inside that courtroom weren't just background noise. They were the sound of history breaking, children crying, parents fainting, protesters demanding answers, a legacy collapsing in real time. We weren't just watching a trial. We were witnessing a soul disintegrate before the eyes of millions. And the chilling part, this is only the beginning. More files will surface. More truths will come to light. And when they do, the world will never be the same again. Because some wounds don't heal. Some betrayals can't be forgiven. And once you hear the sound of someone's soul crying out in pain for the entire world to hear, you never forget it. This isn't just their downfall. It's a warning, a reminder that behind the cameras, behind the fame, lies a battlefield where loyalty dies and greed always wins. So brace yourself. If tonight felt like the end, think again. The next revelation is already on its way. And when it comes, it will leave us breathless.